Welcome back to Zero Gravity Live, your weightless weekly tech talk podcast, bringing all the latest news, discussions, technology right to you. We are sponsored by Object First UPI, Best Storage for Veeam. I'm Anthony, joined by my two besties, Matt and Sterling. Matt, you were a little sick, but I hope you're doing better. How's it going this week?
Yeah, man, I'm a little under the weather, getting back in it though, and it's kind of interesting because the topic of today's show is back to school, and I'll give you one guess where I came down with whatever this is. I've got two little ones that started back on Thursday, and it did not waste any time to take me out.
I'm excited to hear all about it. Sterling,
You
how you doing,
sound
buddy?
so much better. I'm doing great, guys. It's first of all, I missed you all and I missed everybody out there. I've been on the road pretty much ripping it up, talking about how to keep your data safe the past couple of weeks, and I missed a couple of the past episodes. So I've been watching from the outside. Great to be back here today. And like I was saying, Matt, you sound so much better than even yesterday, my friend.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back off the struggle bus, so we'll see how it goes.
Indeed.
Well,
Indeed.
speaking of being on the road, Sterling, we're doing a little bit of a giveaway today. Since it is our back to school episode, we've got a pretty cool backpack full of swag. You don't have to give it to your kids. It's totally usable for you if you'd like. But if you want some Object First swag, let us know where you're watching from. I don't mean like I'm on LinkedIn or I'm on YouTube. We know that. We have the metrics. We want to know where in the world
Where are you coming
is
from?
Carmen San Diego? And more importantly, where are you right now? Where are you watching the stream from geographically? Post it in the comments and we will pick a lucky winner before the end of the stream. And we'll remind you a couple times just in case some people come in stragglers. But it's a cool backpack, y'all. I wanted this backpack, but they won't give it to me. So I have to give it to you. But with that, welcome back to another episode. And Matt, Sterling, y'all have anything in the office this week worth sharing?
So from my perspective, nothing in the office, but I came with an article that I want to share that would sort of dovetail into this kind of thing, and also maybe think about the tools that some of these kids are using going back to school.
I'm down to hear it.
All right, now you guys know that I've been gone for a couple of weeks and I've missed my buddy Matt. So I'm coming in today and I'm coming in hot with how Microsoft could resurrect the Windows phone through its AI. Yes, Matt, this is just for you, buddy. I'm just going to run through this. Hey, listen. This is a little bit of clickbait here. I've got to admit. Literally what this talks about is how AI is going to change how we interact with our phones and apps. Now, as I scroll down through this is actually a pretty good read. It talks about how Microsoft AI and even all of the AI and AI GPT chats are changing how we not only interact with getting our information, but actually finding out or not using apps to get that information. So for instance, instead of going to a Photos app, you just talk to Canvas GPT, and it can actually make you a photo right like that. So instead of going to Kayak, the actual app, you could actually leverage the Kayak GPT, and go ahead and get your flights there. Now, all of these things are predicated upon APIs. And if you talk about, and if you've heard us talk about Object First and how we interact with Veeam, we use a lot of these APIs. It's pretty much standard today, and it's really removed a lot of the difficulty in getting certain technologies to integrate. This was really interesting. It does go a little bit into the why the Windows Phone fails, and I know Matt's going to find that to be a great read. And it talks about some of the diehards. Myself, my buddy Anton Gostev is one. There's some others that really wish that it would have come back. In fact, Satya, the CEO of Microsoft, has even gone on record saying that he stepped away from it too soon. So, Microsoft AI has really taken off. It's the Copilot has gotten really popular. If any of you have seen any of the commercials during the Olympics and how it can really sort of summarize meetings and things like that, it really is a great way and something that's really kind of coming around there. So, I'll kind of pause right there and get sort of Matt's feedback on what you think here.
Just had to throw that in there for you, Sterling. I think the AI part is interesting to see how they could resurrect that, but it's had its time, it's moved on. So who knows what they can do with the Windows Phone to bring it back? I know there was a lot of loyal, fanfare of it for a hot minute, yourself included, but I don't know. What do you think, Anthony?
So this is just giving me a little bit of vibes here of some of the other topics we brought up previously on the show. That AI pen, that other AI device. It seems like we're starting to create a lot of devices that revolve around AI as the central concept for what makes it work. And none of them have actually been a success yet. Now, if anyone's going to do it, it would be Microsoft or Amazon or someone with like a lot of infrastructure, a lot of large language learning model capability.
Yeah.
So I don't doubt their ability to actually kind of deliver on this promise. The question is this differentiated enough for anyone to actually care? Does anyone need this device in their life when they already have the Google phone, the iPhone, or, the old Razor Flip, which I think we all need to get back to. But, I'm not going to write it off. As skeptical as I am, I could see them actually pulling it off. They'd be the first ones to pull it off. I think I've said this before. Copilot is a tremendous technology, especially compared to all the other AI engines out there that are kind of just free to use. I'm constantly impressed by its ability. So tentative, but they've got an uphill battle to make this thing successful.
I agree. Listen, guys, taking off my Microsoft fanboy hat here, I have to be honest in saying that to me, this article really doesn't talk exactly about how things are going to change with Microsoft, but I think it's going to mark a change in how we are going to interact with our phones and devices.
Agreed.
We've seen a couple of devices come out this year where you wear something on your lapel. They haven't really taken off for several different reasons, but I think this marks a new day and maybe less apps, a little more direct integration.
I completely agree. And I think like just last week, Apple announced they were going to delay their Apple Intelligence AI, because it's not ready. So there is a little bit of a race to the AI phone, perfection, whatever that is. But I am curious to see what each vendor puts out and how it plays. Before we get into our topics for the week, you actually reminded me. I do have something in my office I don't think I've ever shown y'all before, which is kind of funny because it's right in front of me. Have I ever shown you my magnetic keyboard?
No.
This is a keyboard. It's made in Wuting, Sweden. It's for gaming, but this thing is completely magnetic. So it's one of a kind. There's no other keyboards like this out there. They're the ones that make them. What I mean by that is, it's like if I focus is hard. If I push the space bar, you get that comfortable click, what have you. But what you don't see is underneath, this is not a typical on-off switch. It's magnetic and it's pressure sensitive. So if I only push it 50% of the way down, if you have the software, it can detect that. And you're thinking, well, that sounds pretty useless. Why would I ever need something that knows it's 50% pressed? Well, in gaming, you can actually simulate joysticks. So I'm only moving 50% speed. You could simulate pedals for cars. So I'm braking just a little bit. I'm braking a lot. You can do all that with a magnetic keyboard. And also it just feels really cool on the fingers. You don't make the same kind of key mistakes when gaming on one of these because there's actual kind of pressure that you don't get with a normal keyboard. And I adore this thing. It's 60%, so I had to learn a whole lot of shortcuts to make it work. But dang, it's just a fun little device if you're into the PC gaming world.
That's actually pretty cool. Does that tether, or is that a Bluetooth, or how does that connect?
It's USB-C. I just uncabled it for demonstrative purposes.
I was about to say, when you said it was for gaming, I'm like, it's got to be tethered, or you've already
it's wireless. Yeah.
It is also neat because it offers two modes. So there's the magnetic mode, which gives you all the analog functionality of the keystrokes, but also you can do a little keyboard function and it turns it to direct mode. So it operates just like a normal keyboard. So if you're typing up something in Word or whatever, you don't get the kind of pressure strokes you need to make it work.
That's super cool because I've
Yeah.
always been like a fan of like mechanical keyboards, and
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because like you look at all these online retailers like you mentioned Amazon, Best Buy, a lot of them have brick and mortar, a lot don't. But for
Yeah.
me, the one peripheral that I've always wanted a brick and mortar store to buy is the mechanical keyboard. Because if you can't go in there and like feel how the
Yeah.
keys are going to sound and react, and you're just looking at it online, it's like shooting in a barrel. You may get a good one, you may not. So that's one of those things that I've always enjoyed. I've always been a fan of Razer, all the
Mm-hmm.
keyboards that they put out and mice that they've got. But yeah, that's super cool with magnetic. I've never heard anything like that before.
Yeah, it's neat. I've had it for a while. It's worked great. I've definitely had it for over a year and a half now. No issues with the thing so far. Highly
Interesting.
recommend. It probably doesn't. It's not worth the cost if you're just going to use it to type up reports on why UPI is the best storage for Veeam. But
Yeah,
if you're doing something a little more fun, I highly recommend the keyboard. It's magnets. How do they work?
That's
that's
pretty
super
awesome.
cool.
Well, shall we get into our topic for the week? Back to school. And I also see that we got two folks that let us know where they're watching from. We got viewers in France and Italy. Thanks for letting us know. And if you're joining us midstream, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, because of our back to school episode here, we're giving away a very cool backpack full of swag brought to you by Object First. So let us know geographically where you're tuning in from. And at the end of the show, we'll be picking a winner and giving you a link to claim your swag bag. But
Absolutely.
for now, let's get into it. So I actually found a pretty cool article by one of my favorite website news organizations, what have you, NPR, National Public Radio, which is a public radio firm that's kind of sponsored independently in the United States. And they put up this great article. It was a few months ago, but it ties so well into the topic of today. Matt, you got sick from your kids going back to school, but there is another virus on the rise. And this article just it walks through this individual named Scott Elder, who is a superintendent at an Albuquerque public school. His morning when he wakes up to find out the school has been taken hostage by a virus. And
Yikes.
it is just the most, it's upsetting because you think like schools are these sacred things that really should be protected, should be thought about with a lot of care and responsibility. It's our children that are going there and learning. And this article just points out how completely underfunded they are when it comes to cybersecurity. And it even mentions how last year in 2023, there was the whole administration effort to incorporate more cybersecurity and resiliency in schools and educational systems, but it's just not happening. There's some real gems in this article. So there's this one section here. These attacks can also involve Zoom bombing, where someone intrudes on a video call, often with pornographic or hateful images,
Oh,
denial of service attacks, which prevent or slow the use of networks, phishing, and attempt to access data through fraudulent emails. Like, why are guys? This is a school. Like, I get that these bad actors are going after easy targets, and there's nothing easier than a school that's underfunded in the cybersecurity. But like, kids are there, like have some decency, have some respect for the sacred, idea of education.
Yep.
And the article goes on to basically say, it's super easy. We're completely underfunding when it comes to cybersecurity, but I'm gonna spoil the ending because the ending was actually great. He says, it's easy to be paranoid after a cyber attack, and the individual that this is following says in past years he's become paranoid. He was invited to a cybersecurity summit at the White House, but didn't believe the email was authentic. He said, "I got the email and like, oh, good one. That's a good one, right? I'm going to go to the White House." He recalls thinking incredulously and reported the email to his IT department as a phishing attempt. Thankfully, they got back to him quickly and said, "No, this is real, and yes, you have to go." So, like, it's a great story, but as we start to send folks back to school and think about what school and education means, not just for us here in the United States, but for the world globally, they've got a huge target on their backs. And
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear what y'all think about this.
Yeah, I think from an easy target, you're right. I mean, it's underfunding, it's lack of knowledge, and it's you've got so many kids in there that are potentially a lot of vulnerable points too, right? Depending on the age, that they're using systems. Maybe not in elementary school age, but once they're in high school, you've got the whole computer lab, that's always online. So there's a lot of different attack vectors, I guess, or vulnerable points. But to your point, Anthony, it'd be nice if these would be malicious bad actors had a little bit of respect for kids. But let's be honest, we know they don't. They're just trying to see where they can go and what they can do. But it's a shame that it's happening with our education system for sure.
Right.
Yep.
It's
Easy,
the
easy
most
pickings.
sacred of institutions. Go ahead, Sterling.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to say easy pickings. They understand that most schools and some federal agencies are really doing more with less. And so, when you can find somebody that's stretched too thin, we talk here a lot about automating your processes and making sure that you're not leaving doors open and things like that. When you're doing too much, when you're juggling too many things, something stays open. There's usually something there. So it does not surprise me that they're going after some of our most vulnerable places. It's a shame, but
Yeah.
I don't expect that to decrease. Which is why one of our fastest adoptions, certainly people reaching out wanting to learn about Object First, truly is SLED, and I can see why.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting in the article too. They mentioned that when they got locked down, or when there was an instance of a lockdown because of just complete cyber takeover of their infrastructure, the kids couldn't go to class. They couldn't pull out any student records, and they had no ability to actually make the school work. So it's a complete breakdown of their total operating environment. And I was thinking, well, what could Object First do in this scenario, right? And our goal is to provide this immutable backup storage target, which is nigh impenetrable when it comes to data protection. Having a recovery plan in place with good immutable storage and testing it. So if this happens, and Matt, you say this all the time, it's not a matter of if, but when. When this happens, you're ready for it. You know how to recover, you know how to get that data back, and you know exactly where it is. That's the difference between, weeks of kids not going to class, and maybe it's a day, maybe it's 2 days, but you're back up and running soon because you're able to recover that data.
Yeah. Completely agree. What's if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail. So that's
Ah,
something that definitely
Yeah.
believe in wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
another great Matt statement.
That's awesome. I
I
like
can't
that.
claim that. I've seen it, and that's a good one. So let me share a couple things. Sterling,
Yeah.
this is for you.
Touche,
You
my
know,
friend.
we're talking about AI. Let's not forget about Clippy. I also have to do a throwback, right? I
Oh,
cannot believe, and
yes.
clearly this is gonna age me. I cannot believe Mead is still rocking the Trapper Keeper, where you can literally just hop online and buy one. Like, I almost want to do it just to have one for
Just to have
zero
one.
reason other than it to sit on my shelf, just to have a Trapper Keeper in my office. Like,
That
come on,
that paint splatter one, I mean,
right?
that's OG right there.
Right?
Like,
Classic.
I'm very tempted. I have no use for that in my life, but I
No.
want. Oh, look at that one. Binder shapes.
If
That's
Casey's watching, we need an object first Trapper Keeper.
we do. So just in case, I don't know how universal trapper keepers are. What are we showing right now, Matt? What is a trapper
I
keeper?
mean, it's really just a binder with a flap and a piece of Velcro, right? But it was like, you go back to the OG days, the 90s. It was, for me, it was the Trapper Keeper and the starter jacket. Those were the two things that were in the 90s when I was going to school. And essentially, it's just a 3-ring binder with a flap. Nothing,
Mm-hmm.
it's not rocket science, but it was definitely the jam to have, when you were up and coming in the 90s.
That was
I
that was
remember they
such an
had
indicator of how
commercials.
cool you were.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What were you
And
gonna
I
they
say,
just,
had these on the
Sterling?
commercials. That they had these on commercials too, and it was a
Mm-hmm.
popular thing. It was a popular thing. He's absolutely right.
I had to throw this up. I honestly, I was just Googling for a picture, and the first result was mead.com. I'm like, wait a minute. You
Yeah.
mean I can still buy one of these? Oh, this is awesome. Yeah, so shifting back over to the topic, like, this is just one of the many, attacks that I was able to find in like 5 minutes that, just happened back in July of this year. The state of Alabama, which is where I'm from originally, they had another cyber attack happen with the Department of Education. Luckily, they were able to thwart it. They didn't have to pay a ransom, but some of the information was still leaked. And, I
Mhm.
just kind of wanted to, there's a lot of details here, but essentially the net was they were attacked. They did not have to pay a ransom, but they were still impacted because some of that data was leaked. And, Anthony, this kind of goes back to your topic. It's obviously the topic for the show.
Yeah,
When you're thinking about the school system and education, it's all about PII, personally identifiable information. And I think for me, that's like probably one of the biggest vulnerabilities when you look at potentially why some of these cyber criminals are targeting the education system is to steal PII for whatever the use case is. And we talk about Veeam plus object first. That's the best storage for Veeam. One of the things, and I've said it many times on the show before, is ransomware is one thing, immutability is definitely critical, but encryption is also very important to not overlook, because if somebody were to hack the backups and gain access to them, if they're immutable, they could still be copied, right? So there's nothing to actually stop that data from moving. But if it's encrypted data, what good is it anyway? And I think
yep.
that's something to really hone in on when we look at the education system is the vulnerability of PII.
That is a really good point. And it's funny. I'm working on this in Europe. There's this regulation called NIS2 that's coming out right now, and it's massive, all encompassing, just thousands of not thousands, probably hundreds of pages that just talk about what an organization needs to do to be cyber resilient. And they
Mhm.
talk about cryptography and encryption in multiple different spots in there. And I was thinking about like how important specifically cryptography and encryption are when it comes to backup data, because even in the most immutable and secure environments, you still have to be able to pull that data back.
Yep.
But if you can pull it back, they can pull it back. And to your point, Matt, like if it's not encrypted, you're basically just giving them open secrets. And that's the wombo combo
Yeah.
is encryption plus immutability, and then using least privilege access when it comes to who gets access to what. And in a school system, that's hard because you probably have like one cybersecurity administrator, because who can afford multiple cyber administrators in a school, right? Like we're talking school budgets. We already know those things are low as they get. So
Yeah.
think about, how do you segment your infrastructure? How do you make all of those independent accounts operating, or how to make those accounts operate independently of each other, so when it comes time to recover, you're not compromising everything with a single login or password.
Yep.
It's a lot of parts and pieces, but I mean, there are ways that we can get to a better state of recovery to prevent these kind of things from happening.
Agreed. Agreed. I feel
Yeah.
like
And
some standardization will help too. What were you going to say, Matt?
I was going to say the only other thing I want to drop, and just because this is the topic of the show, if there's any teachers that potentially are watching, any educators, so this is a site called commonsense.org. Maybe it's a little condescending name for their website because it's not common sense, if you don't know it, right? But I did think that this was a good resource to share because it gives you some tips and some best practices if you're in the education system on how to better protect, let's say, your classroom, your students from any of these cyber threats. And, there's a lot of differences, just like I said earlier. Are you teaching young kids? Are you teaching middle school students? Because the threat level is going to be different. Once you go up the ladder in education, when you give them more access to computers. So I thought this was a really good resource. And what I'm going to do is just drop a QR code in the top corner. If anybody happens to be watching, that's in the education system, this is definitely a good read.
I actually saw that in my research for this episode, and just going through that website beforehand, that is a great resource. And again, I do love the name commonsense.org. A lot of people, they don't have it, including myself
Yeah.
sometimes. So I do appreciate when
Yeah.
people drop common sense on me. And this is just a superb resource, especially for educators out there.
There used to be a saying, Sterling, you might remember this. We've gone through some training way back in the day at Veeam, and when people would say obviously, the guy would respond as any fool can see, right? Because if you say obviously and it's not obvious to them, are they
Yeah.
a fool?
Yeah. Yes, I do remember that, and that's all good. But it makes you think twice before you use that. It's like, obviously, is it? Is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what my knee jerk was when I saw this common sense. I'm like, is
Yeah,
it? Okay.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, good stuff. So Sterling, what do you got?
This is actually awesome, and what I have to share is actually going to dovetail quite nicely into both what you gentlemen both have. Get it up here right now. What you have already shared as well, and so we have a lot of kids that are actually going back to school. How they are learning is changing. You know, I was just on travel last week, and I had a great opportunity to catch up with an old buddy of mine who his son was just about to start the first grade. And we talked a little bit about what they're giving their students. When do they give their students laptops? When do they give their students, certain types of technologies to learn from? Do they teach their students cursive? We went through all of these sort of, parts of our education that we remembered and how things are different. What this article really talks about and goes into, once again, this is good as
Whoa.
well. It talks, I know, right? It talks about how technology is changing, but also how our attitudes towards it has changed. So I'll just kind of touch high level on a couple of these. AI in the classroom, at first, a lot of teachers were really worried that AI would sort of change and kind of dampen the experience of learning because kids can kind of just ask everything. I was having a really interesting conversation with a good friend a couple of weeks ago, and really it boiled down to it's a new world with new kinds of problems, and you have to look at them through a new lens. And I thought that was really interesting because we all learn how we learned, and we kind of hold on to it. Do we need, a cursive? Do we need to, do everything through longhand versus calculators? And maybe we don't. Maybe we're looking at the next level of issues or things that the next generation is going to have to solve, and they need to use the tools today to do it. And so this article talks a little bit about AI in the classroom, but AI can also help teachers grade their papers quicker and actually do it more accurately. They go through and talk about how immersive environments are really going to be the new field trip of the future. So you're going to be able to take your students to Hong Kong or Japan and not just Washington, D.C., which I went to every year of my life from 5 years old to 18 years old. And so it also talks about the gamification of activities and how it can really latch on to some of that to really drive home some of these lessons that the kids want to learn. So, in effect, not only is there new technology that we're dropping on the kids as they grow, but also new ways to learn. And so if anybody out there is listening, if you have kids that are going back to school, what changes are you seeing today? We'd love to hear it down there in the chat. What do you guys think, Matt?
That's wild. The very first graphic is like, it's just mind blowing to think. I was joking about the 90s with Trapper Keepers, and obviously tech evolves, but I remember being in a computer lab and we had the Apple IIe's or whatever they were, just the very first generation computers where literally you're doing word processing with Word Perfect and trying not to die of dysentery on the Oregon Trail, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, it was very, very basic. Now you've got VR goggles on, and I don't know. Like I think there's a place for technology in education, obviously. I think we have to be careful though about how far we go. Like I would certainly not want a classroom full of students with VR goggles on. That kind of takes the human element a bit out. So, and you threw up cursive. That was wild because are we still teaching cursive? Is that still a thing? Like
I
my
hope
kids are
not.
going through and they're
No.
they're they're just lucky to write, where
Yeah.
somebody can read it legibly, much less cursive. But then again, mine are younger. I don't know if that's something that's coming, down the pipe, but is that still a thing?
That's a
You
great
know,
question.
I'm a little side tangent here because cursive just threw me down a mental path. I've been learning Japanese for the last year, and when you learn Japanese, they also teach you the written system as well. And there's at least three primary writing systems in Japanese, which is the hiragana. They're characters that represent sounds that you make. There's katakana, which is characters that represent sounds that you make, and then there's kanji, which is characters that represent words and sounds. And if that sounds confusing, just imagine having to learn your regular alphabet and then learn cursive for a completely different alphabet, and then learn an alphabet that is based on pictographs that might make sense as a native, but would not make sense to any of us as a non-native there. And I'm doing all right, y'all. I'm doing okay. I can write in the hiragana, and I can kind of get to the katakana, and I can put words together. I'll tell you what, kids have it easy here, just based on what they have to learn. In Japan, whew, I miss cursive, and I never thought I would say that. But what I'll say in regard to this article is the thing that excites me the most about technology in the classroom is I was not the best student. And I would attribute a lot of that to the fact that I was, this is not a brag, I was often ahead of like the teacher in the class, which led me to get very bored and my mind to kind of wander. It's like, oh, I already know this. I already learned this. So I'm going to, zone out or doodle. And then I would miss things that I actually needed to learn. Gamification and technology helps minds like mine focus back in. And I could just imagine like kids today with all the distractions they have and just the screen addictions and the short attention spans, they don't just need this. It's like this is a requirement to advance education. So I'm really glad you shared this, Sterling. And I'm glad to see this because if I struggled back then, I can't imagine how kids are struggling today.
So one of the things that jumps out to me that I'm a huge proponent for, and I don't know how widely it's adopted, is digital books versus physical books. I know you guys remember the backpacks full of books that weighed 50 pounds. And
Yes.
imagine if you can just have an iPad that's got all your books and all your, classes right there on your iPad. I would have loved that. I could have put it right in my Trapper Keeper. And
It's true.
I wouldn't have even needed a backpack, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of uses for it. But the other flip side of it that brings me back to the day was, back when I was in school, it was the TI 85. And I know there were the 83s and the later gens, but that calculator was borderline sophisticated where it could solve problems without you actually needing to do it.
Yeah.
Imagine what they have now with Chat GPT.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is kind of my point. We have to do it within reason and set boundaries and guardrails around it because you still got to teach these kids something, right? They can't just go to Chat GPT for everything. And I think, that kind of goes back to when you go do a professional exam, in these testing centers, you can't wear your Apple Watch, you can't take your phone, you've got to take all the smart technology off to prove that you still know, the knowledge you're being tested on. So I think there's a lot of great uses for tech in schools and education just within reality, right?
Yeah. When I think back at this, and you bring up a very good point here, Matt, when I think back of how education's changed, writing papers by hand versus word processor that checks our spelling. You do need to understand a modicum of how to spell, but for the most part, a lot of these programs will do that for you or sometimes tweak that. And where is the borderline of what you need to know versus this is part of our society now, what else can we move on to solve? And I think that's going to kind of be a bit of a balancing act. For me, when we talk about education, I love to see this. Like Anthony, there were different ways that I learned to associate growing up that sometimes weren't the way the rest of the class was doing it. And when I learned my way, it clicked, but it took some time to do. These types of tools can help do that for a myriad of different ways of learning, but there's still that interaction piece. School isn't from pre-K all the way up through college. School isn't just about what you're learning in the books. It's also about the interaction. It's about how you grow. Heck, most of college is learning the process. Did you get your classes signed up for in time? Are you talking to the right instructor? These things teach us in life what we need to do. You pay your insurance, you pay your mortgage. It's almost like teaching those things. And if you take everything into the virtual world, I think you're missing out on a lot of that human interaction and sort of how to navigate the world. So I really hope we can find sort of a medium there.
Completely agree. And, to wrap it all together, I think the thing that's missing in all of this is we need to be teaching kids about cybersecurity, right? Yeah. Like there needs to be curriculum to understand the importance of cyber resilience, cybersecurity, not just as, someone working in a company like Object First, but as individuals. You need to cyber secure your life. And, we don't really teach kids about the dangers of the internet, and it's probably the most dangerous thing that exists for
Yes.
kids today.
Yes.
So,
Mentally as well as
yeah,
data wise, right? I mean,
right. Like we don't protect them. Well, we try to, but it's very hard to protect them digitally, as we show with the previous pieces. It's not cheap or easy, but
yeah.
we certainly need to make sure that they are educating themselves and understand how to take care of themselves.
Could not agree more. And I think back in the days when I was going to school, there was no education around anything security related that was ever taught in school. I mean, they weren't even teaching finances in school. Talk about a class that needed to be included, in I would say high school. But
Mhm.
there's a lot of things now that are just going to be required, and I would totally agree. Like cybersecurity education, phishing, all these different types of threats, what to look out for. I mean, maybe it's even a class, dedicated just to that, with a whole curriculum
Yep.
for a whole semester. There's plenty of meat on the bone, to fill that curriculum. So maybe we evolve to the point where that's a required class, when
Yeah.
they're going through school. I would love to see that.
I mean, they added computer labs when I was going through my education as a child. Like they can absolutely add this. And I think it's something that's worthwhile to learn as a young adult or young kid, because these are jobs, right? Like we
Yeah.
work in the cybersecurity industry. These kids are going to be working in the cybersecurity industry. The more we educate them, the better they'll be.
Agreed. Agreed.
Well, I think that does it for our back to school episode. So, for those of you with kids out there, hopefully they're getting ready to go back and they're staying healthy and well and not passing the viruses on to you like they have Matt.
Yeah.
But we do have a winner. So, we threw our entries, all of the folks that told us where you're watching from, into a randomizer. And the output was Nicolas Gross. Hopefully, I did not butcher your name there. We have your LinkedIn, so we'll reach out to you directly and send you a link to win your swag backpack, swag pack. There we go. Congratulations and thanks for joining us and watching from France, of all places. So
Yeah.
we love our European and international audience. It's always great to have you here. And thanks as always for joining in and watching our Zero Gravity live streams. As always, the show is brought to you by Object First, makers of OOTB, that stands for Out of the Box Mutability, and it is the best storage for Veeam. Thanks to Matt and Sterling, as always, for joining and bringing those topics in conversation. And for the rest of y'all, stay weightless, stay frictionless, stay zero gravity.